My mom grabbed the mic at my graduation party and shouted, "You only got that scholarship because you're pretty, not smart." Everyone laughed. Then she threw my acceptance letter into the fire. My boss was there. And what he did next left everyone speechless. I, Ella, 22, just graduated from high school, and after years of hard work, I received a scholarship to the University of Florida. The scholarship meant everything to me. But when my mom, Jo, 45, grabbed the mic at my graduation party and made a cruel comment, I was humiliated. She said I only got the scholarship because I was pretty and not because I was smart. To make matters worse, she threw my acceptance letter into the fire. But then, something happened that changed everything. My boss, James, was there, and what he did next left everyone in the room speechless. I had been waiting for this day for as long as I could remember. The letter from the University of Florida had come in months ago, and ever since, my life had felt like it was on the brink of something big. I was the quiet kid in school, the one who would stay late after class, scribbling notes, poring over textbooks. My grades had always been good, but I never felt like I was special. My mom, Jo, had always told me that my looks were the only thing that would get me anywhere in life. The words stung back then, but I had learned to shrug them off. But now, with the scholarship in hand, everything felt like it was finally coming together. The graduation party we threw that evening was supposed to be a celebration, nothing fancy, just a gathering of family, a few close friends, and some of my high school teachers. The house smelled of freshly baked cookies, and the walls were adorned with "Congratulations, Ella" banners. I could hear the soft chatter of people catching up, sharing stories. There was a buzz of excitement that made the day feel almost perfect. But then there was my mom. Jo always had this air about her, like she was the center of attention, like all eyes had to be on her. She had that way of commanding a room, not necessarily with kindness but with sharpness, with a kind of controlled charisma. I never liked being the center of attention, but I knew she relished it. As I stood by the food table, talking to some of my teachers, I saw her walk up to the microphone. I froze. I don't know why, but in that moment, something told me it wasn't going to go the way I hoped. "Thank you all for coming," Jo said, her voice loud and clear, carrying across the room. Everyone went silent, and I could feel all eyes on her. I forced a smile. My mom was about to say something nice, I thought. Something that would make this day even better. Then she turned toward me, a sly grin spreading across her face. "I'm so proud of my daughter, Ella," she said. "She's worked so hard to get this scholarship. But let's be honest, she only got it because she's pretty, not because she's smart. Let's face it, folks. We all know how the world works." There was a moment of stunned silence. I felt my heart drop to my stomach. Was she serious? Was she really standing there, saying that to everyone in the room? A small chuckle erupted from one of my relatives. Then it spread. More people laughed. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I wanted to scream, to run away, but I stood there frozen. My mom's words stung far deeper than I ever thought they could. She always made comments like this, but in private. I had gotten used to it. But now, in front of everyone? I wanted to say something, but my throat was dry. I couldn't even form the words. But Jo wasn't finished. She continued, her voice laced with condescension, "Ella, you know how this works. People give you things when you look a certain way. And that scholarship? Well, it's not because you're the brightest, it's because of how you look." The laughter in the room grew louder. My hands clenched into fists by my sides. I didn't know how to respond. This wasn't just an embarrassing moment, it felt like a betrayal. Then, to my utter disbelief, Jo reached for the table where I had carefully placed my acceptance letter. My acceptance letter, the piece of paper that represented everything I had worked for. The culmination of years of late nights, hard work, and sacrifice. She picked it up with a casual flick of her wrist. "What's the point of this?" she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "It's just a piece of paper. Let's see how long it lasts." Before anyone could say a word, she threw the letter into the fire. My breath caught in my chest as I watched the flames curl around the edges of the letter. It was gone in moments, reduced to nothing but ash. The room went completely silent. The laughter stopped. The people who had been smiling and clapping just a moment ago were now frozen, unsure of what to do or say. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My mom had just destroyed the very thing I had worked for, the thing that was supposed to change my life. I didn't know whether to feel anger, sadness, or complete disbelief. The one person who was supposed to have my back had just ripped my dream apart. And then, as if the universe had decided I needed someone to step in, I heard a voice that I didn't expect. "Excuse me, Joe, but that's enough." I turned around to see James Walters, my boss. James wasn't just my boss, he was the CEO of the tech company where I'd been interning for the past year. I hadn't expected him to come to the party, but there he was, standing at the door, wearing his usual crisp suit. He was out of place at the party, but there was something in the way he carried himself that immediately made everyone stop. He walked toward the center of the room, and I felt the tension rise as everyone turned to look at him. "What do you mean, enough?" my mom snapped, her voice defensive. "Ella worked hard for that scholarship, Joe," James said calmly, his eyes locking onto my mom's. "You can't just stand here and tear her down like that. She deserves better. She deserves respect." Joe's eyes narrowed, and she opened her mouth to retort, but James didn't back down. "I don't know what's going on between you two, but from what I've seen, Ella is one of the brightest, most driven people I've had the privilege of working with. You should be proud of her, not belittling her in front of everyone." I was in shock. I had never seen James speak to anyone like that, let alone my mom. I had always thought of him as the calm, professional type, someone who kept his distance from personal matters. But here he was, standing up for me in a way I never imagined possible. My mom didn't know what to say. She looked around the room, but no one spoke up in her defense. The awkwardness was suffocating. Her face flushed with embarrassment, but she still didn't apologize. Instead, she just muttered, "She's too sensitive." I could feel my throat tighten, but I was too proud to let her see how much her words hurt. I had spent so many years trying to live up to her expectations, and no matter what I did, it was never enough. But James? He didn't know the history between us, and in that moment, his words felt like a lifeline. "Ella," James said, his voice softer now as he turned to me. "You've done something incredible, and don't let anyone, no matter who they are, make you feel otherwise." He gave me a small, encouraging smile before turning back to my mom. "I'm not going to stay here and watch this. If you can't support your daughter, then I don't think you should be here." With that, James walked out, leaving the room in stunned silence. The guests looked at each other, not sure how to react. My mom stood frozen, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. I looked at the smoldering ashes of my acceptance letter and felt a strange sense of clarity. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. I had worked for this, and I was going to move forward with or without her. The room was quiet for a long time after James left. My mom eventually left, too, but I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. It was time for me to take control of my own future. The next day, I went to UF to register for my classes, and I felt lighter than I had in years. My relationship with my mom had been strained for a long time, but now I understood something I hadn't before. I wasn't defined by her or anyone else. I was defined by my own choices. And I was going to make sure my future was everything I had dreamed of, and more. The next few days after the party were some of the most difficult I had ever faced. I felt numb. The events of that night replayed in my head like a broken record. The laughter, the fire, my mother's cruel words, they felt like they were etched into my memory, impossible to shake off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing there, her face full of disdain as she dismissed everything I had worked for. But there was also a strange feeling I couldn't quite describe. Maybe it was relief. Or maybe it was a sense of freedom that I had never allowed myself to feel before. James' words kept echoing in my mind, "Don't let anyone, no matter who they are, make you feel otherwise." That was the turning point, wasn't it? James, a man who barely knew me outside of the office, had stood up for me in a way I had never expected. I'd never had anyone like that in my corner. Not like this. My mom hadn't reached out after the party. She didn't apologize, didn't ask how I was feeling, and didn't seem to care that I had just watched her burn my future in front of everyone. I didn't expect anything different, but it still hurt. I spent the next couple of days mostly avoiding people. My friends had sent texts, asking if I was okay, but I didn't know how to respond. What was there to say? They didn't know the depth of the relationship between my mom and me. They couldn't understand the years of cutting remarks, the backhanded compliments, or the way she made me feel like I would never be good enough, no matter how hard I tried. I didn't want to burden them with that. They had their own lives to live, their own problems to deal with. But there was one person who reached out that I didn't expect. It was James. He sent me a simple message that evening: "I hope you're doing okay. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." It was one of those messages that didn't feel forced. It wasn't a pity message or an obligation. It was genuine. And it made me pause for a moment, thinking about what he had done for me. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone for a long time before I finally typed back. "Thanks, James. I appreciate it. It's been a rough couple of days, but I'm managing." His response came quickly. "Good. Don't let people try to tear you down. You've earned everything you have. You deserve this." I sat there for a moment, my mind swirling with thoughts. I had been so focused on what my mom thought of me, on trying to please her, that I hadn't allowed myself to consider that maybe I didn't need her approval. Maybe, just maybe, I could carve out a life where I made the rules. I still couldn't shake the feeling that I had been humiliated in front of everyone that night, though. I hadn't expected it to feel so public, so devastating. My mom had always found a way to make everything about her, but this felt different. It wasn't just the way she burned my letter. It was the fact that she had done it in front of my friends, my teachers, and even my boss. It felt like an attack on who I was, on everything I had worked for, as if she was telling me that nothing I did could ever be enough. I couldn't let that be the narrative I carried forward. The next morning, I woke up determined. I was going to UF, no matter what. My mom's words couldn't take that away from me. I spent hours that day on the phone with the admissions office, making sure everything was in order, reapplying for my student loans, and finalizing my schedule. I had so much to do, and as I worked through the checklist of things that needed to be done before the fall semester started, I found that the tasks gave me a sense of control. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking ownership of my future. I wasn't going to let my mom's judgmental, cruel behavior dictate how I viewed myself or what I was capable of achieving. A few days later, I was sitting at my desk at the tech company where I had been interning, working through some reports for James, when I got a call from my mom. My heart immediately sank. I hadn't spoken to her since the party, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face her yet. I let it ring out, staring at the phone for a few moments before I hit the decline button. I didn't know what I would say to her. I wasn't sure if I was ready for another confrontation, especially not after everything that had happened. But then, an hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text. "We need to talk. I'm sorry. Please call me when you get a chance." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely. I had been ignoring her for years, hadn't I? What was different now? But another part of me, maybe the part that was still holding on to the hope that she would change, wanted to hear her out. I took a deep breath, placed my phone on the desk, and told myself I wasn't going to back down. If I called her, it wouldn't be to beg for her approval. It would be to set boundaries. I picked up the phone and dialed. When she answered, her voice was soft, almost tentative, which was rare for her. "Ella," she started, I owe you an apology." I waited for her to continue, but the silence stretched between us. Finally, I spoke up. "Why didn't you just say you were proud of me, Mom?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why couldn't you just be happy for me? For once?" She sighed heavily. "I don't know why I said that. I was angry. I felt like you were moving on without me, and I didn't know how to handle it. I guess I just lashed out." My heart ached. I wanted to feel angry at her, but instead, all I felt was a mixture of sadness and confusion. "I didn't ask for your approval, Mom," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I didn't need you to tear me down to feel proud of myself. I've worked hard, and I was just trying to celebrate something I did on my own." She was silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was tinged with regret. "I know. I see that now," she said quietly. "And I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if this apology was enough. After everything, could I forgive her? Could I ever go back to the way things were? I didn't know yet. But I was determined to figure it out, on my own terms. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for her approval. And that felt, for better or worse, like freedom. I ended the conversation shortly after, not sure what would happen next. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going to let her, or anyone, stand in the way of my future. The days after my conversation with my mom were quiet. We didn't speak much after that phone call. It felt like she had apologized, and I had accepted it, well, in my own way. But things weren't quite right between us. I was still grappling with the hurt, the years of subtle rejection and sharp remarks that had built up over time. I didn't know how to go back to being close with her, not yet. Meanwhile, I kept moving forward. I focused on getting ready for the new semester at UF. James continued to be supportive, checking in now and then to see how things were going. I still felt that pull of something unspoken between us, something I didn't want to acknowledge, but it was always there. By the time school was starting again, I had made it my goal to prove to myself that I didn't need anyone's validation but my own. I wasn't going to live in the shadow of my mother's expectations or my aunt's scorn. I was going to make something of myself, something they would never be able to take away from me. And then came the moment I didn't see coming. It was the first day of classes, and I was walking around campus, trying to get a feel for the semester ahead, when I received a text from my mom. My heart skipped a beat. It was rare for her to text me first after everything, but this one was different. "I'm sorry for everything. I know I've hurt you. I've been thinking about what you said, and I want to make it right. Can we meet?" I stood frozen, staring at the message, unsure of how to respond. After all this time, after everything she'd said and done, could I really trust her again? Was this truly an apology, or was it another one of her attempts to manipulate me into conforming to her version of who I should be? I thought about it for a while. And then, without telling anyone, I agreed to meet her. We decided to meet at a small cafe near my old neighborhood. When I arrived, she was already sitting at a corner table, her hands folded in front of her. There was something different about her today, more vulnerable than I had seen in years. She didn't immediately rush to greet me, instead, she waited until I sat down before speaking. "I'm sorry, Ella," she said quietly, looking down at her hands. "I was wrong. I've always been so caught up in what I wanted for you that I lost sight of what you needed. I didn't want you to leave. I was scared. And I lashed out because of it. Her apology was sincere, I could tell. But it wasn't just the words she spoke. It was the way she said them, soft, almost unsure. I had never heard her speak to me like that before. I took a deep breath. I wanted to say so much, but what was there to say? The pain of everything that had happened over the years wasn't something that could be erased in one conversation. I didn't expect her to fix everything. I don't need your approval, Mom, I said, my voice steady. But I do need respect. I've always needed that from you. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I could see the regret there, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive her. I still didn't know if I ever could. We sat in silence for a few moments, both of us feeling the weight of the conversation. It wasn't a magical moment of reconciliation like I had hoped for, but it was a start. Eventually, I stood up and placed my hand on her shoulder. I'm going to keep moving forward. I hope you understand that. She nodded, her voice soft. I do. I do understand, Ella. Months passed, and I focused on what mattered most, my future. I made the decision to take some time away from family gatherings, to step back and focus on myself. I had no idea what was coming, but the moment I began to truly detach from my past, things started to change in ways I didn't expect. One evening, about a month after the conversation with my mom, I received an invitation for a family reunion. It was a casual gathering, barbecue at my aunt's house. The last time I'd been there was the year before, when my mom had made her infamous comments about me in front of the whole family. I didn't want to go, but part of me felt like I had to face them, show them that I wasn't the failure they thought I was. When I arrived at Aunt Louise's house, there was an awkward tension in the air. My mom wasn't there yet, but the others were already gossiping, laughing in small groups. I could see the way they looked at me, like I didn't belong. It wasn't outright hostility, but the judgment was palpable. I didn't sit with them. Instead, I wandered to the back of the house where the grill was going. There, I found my cousin Matt and a few others from my generation. We chatted for a while, and I felt like I could finally relax. They didn't judge me, they didn't look down on me. They treated me like I was worth something, and that was more than I could have asked for. Eventually, my mom arrived. She smiled at me, but there was something forced about it. It was as though she was trying too hard to prove that everything was okay between us. But I didn't feel okay. I could hear snippets of conversations from the others, and it was then that I realized the truth. Aunt Louise was gossiping again, loud enough for me to hear, and I couldn't help but listen. She's doing better now, I suppose, Louise said, her voice tinged with mockery. But I still don't get why she didn't just listen to us in the first place. She could have had it all if she just followed the rules. My heart clenched, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. They didn't understand. They never would. That was when I realized that it didn't matter what they thought. It didn't matter if they never accepted me or if they continued to talk behind my back. What mattered was that I was finally building a life for myself, one that didn't require their approval. One that didn't need their validation. I stood up, ready to leave, but before I did, I made my move. I walked to the front of the house where my mom and aunt were sitting. Both of them looked at me, a bit surprised, but I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. Mom, I said, looking her directly in the eyes, Aunt Louise. I've spent enough of my life trying to meet your expectations. I don't need your approval anymore. But I will no longer be your punching bag. I looked at Aunt Louise, my gaze firm and steady. You can talk about me all you want. It doesn't change the fact that I'm doing better than I've ever been. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out, leaving the family reunion behind. As I drove home that night, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. I didn't need to prove myself to them. I had already proved everything I needed to, and I didn't need their toxic approval to validate my journey. Months passed, and my mom eventually reached out again. She wanted to meet and talk. I agreed, but I made it clear that I wasn't going to let her treat me the way she always had. It wasn't about being confrontational. It was about setting boundaries, something I had never been able to do before. Our relationship never fully healed, but it was better. I learned to take care of myself, and I learned to value my own worth. The real victory, however, came in the form of something I never expected: peace. Not peace with them, but peace with myself. And that was enough.